The Great Hall of Prime was the largest structure ever built by living hands. It floated in the empty space between three major trade routes, a neutral ground where the powers of the galaxy could meet without fear. The station itself was older than most civilizations that used it. Some said it had been built by a race that died out long before humans learned to make fire. Others said it was a gift from beings who lived in dimensions that normal creatures could not see. Nobody knew the truth anymore, and nobody really cared. What mattered was that Prime belonged to everyone and no one, and that made it the perfect place for the Interstellar Assembly to hold its meetings. Ambassador Daniel Price had been coming to the station for 7 years now. He remembered his first visit clearly, the way his breath had caught in his throat when his shuttle approached the massive structure. The main hall alone was large enough to hold a small moon inside it. The ceiling was so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top, and the walls were covered with symbols and writing from 1,000 different species, each one marking their place in the long history of galactic civilization. Humanity's mark was near the bottom, small and recent. They had earned their seat at the assembly only 32 years ago, when their first colony ships reached the edges of known space and made contact with a peaceful race of aquatic beings who had greeted them with curiosity rather than fear. They had sponsored humanity's application to join the assembly, and after much debate and many tests, the older races had agreed to let the young species from Earth take their place among the stars. It had seemed like such a triumph at the time. Daniel remembered watching the ceremony on television as a young man, seeing the first human ambassador sign the great book that held the names of all member species. People had cried with joy. They had believed that humanity had finally arrived, that they were now part of something larger than themselves, something ancient and wise and wonderful. 7 years of working in this place had taught Daniel that the truth was far less inspiring. He stood at the human delegation's podium now, watching the other representatives file into their positions around the circular chamber. The design of the room was meant to suggest equality, with each species given a podium of exactly the same size and height, arranged in a perfect circle so that no one was higher or lower than anyone else. But Daniel had learned to read the subtle signs that showed the real hierarchy of power. The delegation arrived with an escort of 6 armed guards, their serpentine bodies coiling around hovering platforms that hummed with expensive technology. Their ambassador, a creature named, wore a ceremonial collar studded with gems that were each worth more than Earth's entire yearly budget for space exploration. They had been spacefaring for 12,000 years, and they made sure everyone remembered it. They came next, their crystalline bodies catching the light and throwing rainbows across the floor. They did not speak with voices, but communicated through patterns of color that rippled across their surfaces. They were old too, perhaps even older than though they rarely bothered to discuss such things. They cared only about trade and profit, and they had made themselves essential to the galactic economy by controlling the production of the crystals that powered faster-than-light travel. They shuffled to their podium, their massive bodies supported by 6 thick legs. They looked like someone had combined an elephant with a crab and then covered the result in thick brown fur. Despite their intimidating appearance, they were generally peaceful, preferring to spend their time on philosophical debates rather than conquest. But they had the third largest military in known space, and nobody forgot that either. One by one, the representatives of 47 spacefaring civilizations took their places. Some were tall, some were short. Some breathed oxygen, some breathed methane, and some did not seem to breathe at all. Some had been traveling between stars when humanity's ancestors were still learning to walk upright. Others were almost as young as humanity itself, species who had clawed their way to the stars through determination and luck, only to find that the universe was already crowded with beings who saw them as children at best and pests at worst. Daniel felt a hand touch his elbow and turned to see Lieutenant Commander Marsh, his aide and closest advisor, standing beside him. Was young for her position, barely 35, but she had a sharp mind and an even sharper instinct for trouble. She had served in Earth's diplomatic corps for 10 years and had seen enough to know that the Assembly was not the noble institution it pretended to be. "They are up to something," she whispered, leaning close to Daniel's ear. "I've been watching since he arrived. He keeps looking at our podium and then looking away when he thinks I might notice." Daniel nodded slightly, keeping his expression neutral. He had noticed it too, was usually happy to stare at the human delegation with open contempt, his forked tongue flickering in what passed for amusement among his kind. Today, that contempt was mixed with something else. Anticipation, perhaps, or satisfaction. "Stay alert," Daniel murmured back. "Whatever it is, we'll find out soon enough." The chamber fell silent as High Speaker took his position at the central dais. Was a member of a species that had served as neutral mediators for the Assembly since its founding. They were tall and thin, with 4 arms and skin like polished obsidian, and they took their role as peacekeepers very seriously. No had ever voted on any matter before the Assembly. They saw their purpose as facilitating discussion, not participating in it. "Representatives of the Interstellar Assembly," announced, his voice deep and resonant, "this session is now convened. The first matter before us today concerns the redistribution of mining rights in the nebula." Daniel felt his stomach tighten. This was it. Earth had spent 3 years surveying the nebula, a dense cloud of gas and dust that contained some of the richest mineral deposits ever discovered. They had filed a claim to begin mining operations under the Assembly's established procedures, and everything had seemed to be in order. But in the weeks leading up to this meeting, he had heard rumors that something was wrong, messages from Earth that were more worried than usual. Warnings from the few friendly species that something was being planned behind closed doors. "The Terran Republic has submitted a formal claim to mining rights in sectors 7 through 12 of the nebula," continued, reading from the official record. "Their claim is based on initial survey rights granted under Section 47 of the Resource Distribution Accord, which states that any species conducting the first comprehensive survey of an unclaimed region may file for primary extraction rights." "If I may, High Speaker." The voice came from the podium. Ambassador was rising on his hovering platform, his long body uncoiling to its full impressive height. His scales caught the light, shimmering between green and gold, and his eyes were fixed on Daniel with an intensity that made the human ambassador's skin prickle. "The representative from the Empire is recognized," said. "Thank you, High Speaker." His voice was smooth and cold, like oil sliding over ice. "I wish to raise an objection to the Terran claim. While it is true that humans conducted surveys in the nebula, I question whether their work meets the standards required by Section 47. Daniel stepped forward. "With respect, Ambassador, our surveys were conducted according to all established protocols. We have submitted complete documentation to the Assembly's Review Committee." "Documentation can be fabricated," replied, his tongue flickering. "The humans are new to space. They lack the experience and the technology to conduct proper surveys. I have consulted with experts from several member species, and they share my concerns." "What experts?" Daniel demanded. "What concerns specifically?" "The technical details are not important at this moment," said dismissively. "What matters is the principle. The nebula contains resources that are vital to the continued prosperity of established civilizations. It would be irresponsible to allow such wealth to fall into the hands of a species that has barely learned to travel between stars." A murmur ran through the chamber. Some of the representatives were nodding, their various forms of heads bobbing or tilting in agreement. Others watched in silence, their expressions unreadable. Touched Daniel's arm again. "This is coordinated," she whispered. "Look at the delegation. They're not even pretending to be surprised." Daniel looked where she indicated. The massive ambassador was watching the exchange with calm interest, as if he already knew how it would end. The same was true of several other delegations, Daniel realized. The Vex, they were all watching and waiting, like spectators at a sporting event who had already been told the final score. "High Speaker," Daniel said, forcing his voice to remain calm. "I request the opportunity to respond to these accusations properly. The Terran Republic has followed every rule and procedure required by the Assembly. If there are specific concerns about our survey methodology, we are happy to address them. But vague claims about our inexperience are not a valid basis for rejecting our claim." "The human speaks of rules and procedures," said, and there was something like laughter in his voice now. "How touching. He believes that the Assembly operates on fairness and justice. He has not yet learned that power is what matters in the end." "Ambassador," said, a note of warning in his tone, "I remind you that all members of this Assembly are bound by the same laws and entitled to the same protections." "Of course, High Speaker. I meant no disrespect." His tongue flickered again. "I simply wish to propose a solution that will satisfy all parties. I move that the Terran claim to the nebula be tabled indefinitely, pending a comprehensive review of their qualifications to conduct resource extraction on this scale." "Seconded," came a voice from the podium. "Seconded," echoed the ambassador. "Seconded," added the representative from the Vex Confederacy. Daniel felt something cold settle in his chest. This was not a debate. This was an execution. Everything had been arranged in advance, the objections rehearsed, the votes counted before the session even began. He and Earth were simply going through the motions of a process whose outcome had already been decided. "Furthermore," continued, his confidence growing with every word, "I move that all Terran vessels be restricted from the nebula region until this review is complete. The area contains navigational hazards that are beyond the capability of human technology to safely navigate. We would not want any accidents to occur." "Seconded. Seconded. Seconded." High Speaker looked troubled, but he had no choice but to follow procedure. "The motions have been made and seconded. The Assembly will now vote." The vote was called. Daniel watched the results appear on the central display, feeling his hope die with each number. 39 civilizations voted in favor of the motion. 7 abstained, including the whose ambassador met Daniel's eyes with an expression of helpless sympathy. Only 1 civilization voted against. "Earth." "The motion passes," announced. "The Terran claim to the nebula is tabled indefinitely. Terran vessels are restricted from the nebula region effective immediately." Turned to look directly at Daniel, and there was no mistaking the triumph in his eyes. "I hope this teaches you something, human. You are guests in our galaxy. It would be wise to remember your place." Daniel said nothing. There was nothing to say. He gathered his documents and turned to leave the chamber, falling into step beside him. Behind them, he could hear the Assembly moving on to other business, the matter of Earth's humiliation already forgotten by most of the representatives. They did not speak until they were back aboard their shuttle, sealed in the small conference room where they could be certain no one was listening. "They planned this from the beginning," said, her voice tight with anger. "The whole claim process, the surveys, the documentation, they let us do all that work knowing they were going to reject it." "Yes," Daniel agreed. "The question is why. The nebula is valuable, but not so valuable that it's worth this kind of coordinated action. There has to be something more." "A test," said slowly. "They wanted to see how we would react, how much we would fight back. And now they know. We followed the rules. We made our arguments. We lost gracefully." Daniel's hands clenched into fists. "We showed them exactly what they wanted to see. A young, weak species that doesn't know how to play the real game." The shuttle's communication system chirped, indicating an incoming priority message. Daniel touched the control to accept it, and the face of Director Cole appeared on the screen. Cole was the head of Earth's Central Intelligence Directorate, a man with silver hair, tired eyes, and the permanent expression of someone who had seen too many things he wished he could forget. "Ambassador," Cole said, "I've been watching the assembly session. I need you to return to Earth immediately. There's something you need to see." "What is it?" "Not over this channel. Even our encrypted systems may not be secure. Just get here as fast as you can." Cole hesitated, and Daniel saw something in his eyes that he had never seen before: fear. "Ambassador, what happened today in the assembly was not the end of something. It was the beginning, and it's worse than you can imagine." The connection closed. Daniel and looked at each other for a long moment. Then Daniel touched the intercom to the cockpit. "Lieutenant, set course for Earth. Maximum speed." "Yes, sir. Estimated travel time at maximum speed is 14 hours." 14 hours. Daniel leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. 14 hours to wonder what could possibly be worse than what had already happened. 14 hours to prepare himself for news that had frightened a man who had spent his entire career dealing with the darkest secrets of the galaxy. He had a feeling that sleep would not come easily. The journey back to Earth passed in a blur of anxious waiting. Daniel tried to rest, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw a triumphant expression, heard the votes being counted one after another, felt the weight of failure pressing down on his shoulders. Worked at her console, reviewing records of the assembly session and looking for any clue about what might be coming, but she found nothing useful. When they finally arrived in Earth orbit, a military shuttle was already waiting to transfer them to the surface. That alone told Daniel that whatever was happening was serious. Normal protocol would have them dock at the orbital station and take a civilian transport down. The presence of a military escort meant that someone wanted them on the ground as quickly as possible, with no delays and no witnesses. The shuttle brought them to a landing pad on the outskirts of Geneva, where a convoy of armored vehicles was waiting. Daniel and were escorted into the lead vehicle, and within minutes they were racing through the city toward the headquarters of the United Earth Government. Daniel had been to this building many times, but he had never seen security this tight. Armed soldiers stood at every entrance, their weapons powered and ready. Checkpoints had been set up in the hallways, with scanners that checked not just identification but also biological markers to ensure that no one was wearing a disguise. By the time they reached the secure conference room deep in the building's underground levels, Daniel had been scanned and cleared more times than he could count. Director Cole was waiting for them, along with several other people Daniel recognized. Admiral Lane, commander of Earth's home fleet. Defense Secretary, a stern man with a military bearing despite his civilian title. Dr. Susan Park, head of the Advanced Research Division. And one woman Daniel did not recognize, a dark-haired figure in civilian clothes who stood slightly apart from the others, watching everything with sharp, assessing eyes. "Ambassador Price, Lieutenant Commander Marsh," Cole said as they entered. "Thank you for coming so quickly. Please sit down." Daniel took his seat beside him. "What's this about, Director? What's worse than what happened at the assembly?" Cole looked at the others around the table, as if seeking their permission to continue. Admiral Lane nodded slightly. "Ambassador," Cole said, 3 days ago our intelligence network intercepted a series of encrypted communications between the Empire and 6 other Assembly member species. We've been working around the clock to decode them. We finished about 4 hours ago." He paused, his expression grim. The vote today was not about the nebula. It was not about mining rights or resource distribution. It was a test, just as Lieutenant Commander Marsh suspected. A test to confirm that humanity would not fight back. "Fight back against what?" Daniel asked. Cole touched a control on the table, and a holographic display appeared in the air above them. It showed a star map, with Earth's sun at the center and the boundaries of human territory marked in blue. Red icons were scattered around the edges of that territory, hundreds of them. "These are the current positions of military vessels," Cole said. "And these," he touched another control and more icons appeared in different colors, are the positions of ships from the Federation, the Collective, the Vex Confederacy, the Union, the League, and the Dominion. 7 species in total, 200 warships. Daniel stared at the display, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. They're surrounding us. Not yet, but they're moving into position. According to the communications we intercepted, they plan to enter the Sol system in approximately 70 hours. Cole's voice was steady, but Daniel could hear the strain beneath it. The operation is called Quiet Dawn. Its official purpose is a joint military exercise demonstrating cooperation in the Sol sector. Its actual purpose is to establish a complete blockade of Earth. A blockade, repeated, to what end? To force us to surrender our military forces, our colony ships, and our seat on the Assembly. They believe that once we see the size of the fleet arrayed against us, we'll have no choice but to capitulate. They expect us to submit without a fight. Daniel felt a cold fury building in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. And if we don't submit? Cole looked at Admiral Lane. The Admiral leaned forward, her weathered face set in hard lines. If we don't submit, Lane said, they plan to demonstrate their resolve by destroying one of our outer colonies. They've already selected the target. Harmony Station, population 40,000. After that, they'll offer us a second chance to surrender. If we still refuse, they'll move on to larger targets. Eventually, if we hold out long enough, they'll attack Earth itself. The room was silent. Daniel looked around the table, seeing the same shock and anger on every face. 40,000 people on Harmony Station. Men, women, children. Families who had traveled to the stars hoping to build a better life. And they had been chosen to die as a warning, a lesson to teach humanity its place. This can't be real, Daniel said finally. The Assembly has rules against this kind of thing. There are treaties, protections for member species. The treaties only protect members who can enforce them, the dark-haired woman said. It was the first time she had spoken, and her voice was cool and precise. We can't. That's why they chose us. Daniel turned to look at her. And you are? Blake, Director of Special Projects. She did not offer to shake hands or provide any further details. My division has been preparing for this possibility since the day we joined the Assembly. I'm here because the preparations are complete. What preparations? Asked. Looked at Cole, who nodded. Ambassador Price, what I'm about to show you is classified at the highest level. Until today, fewer than 50 people on Earth knew it existed. After this meeting, that number will rise to 53. Touched a control and the holographic display changed. It now showed a network of installations spread across the solar system, hidden in places that no one would think to look. Asteroids in the belt, craters on the far side of the moon. Orbiting stations disguised as communication relays or research platforms. We call it Project Prometheus, continued. 17 years of development, funded through channels that don't appear in any public budget. We've built a defensive network capable of protecting Earth from any conventional attack. Daniel studied the display, trying to understand what he was seeing. Some of the installations were clearly weapons platforms, their functions obvious from their design. Others were more mysterious, their purposes unclear. And this will be enough to stop 200 warships, he asked. That depends on what you mean by stop. Zoomed in on one particular installation, a massive structure hidden in the asteroid belt. It was larger than most space stations Daniel had seen, shaped like a long cylinder with complex arrays at each end. This is the centerpiece of our network. We call it the Shepherd's Staff. It's a directed energy weapon unlike anything else in the galaxy. I've never heard of it, said. No one has. That's the point. The weapon uses principles that we don't fully understand ourselves. We discovered them by accident during research into exotic matter 20 years ago. We've spent 2 decades trying to figure out how to use what we found. Expression was unreadable. The Shepherd's Staff can generate a pulse that interferes with the specific frequencies used by Assembly member species for shield generation and power distribution. One shot, properly calibrated, can disable an entire fleet. Daniel stared at her. Disable, not destroy. The pulse overloads their systems but doesn't cause direct physical damage. Their shields will collapse. Their weapons will go offline. Their engines will drop to emergency power only. They'll be drifting and helpless, but they'll be alive. Paused. We designed it that way on purpose. We didn't want a weapon that could only kill. We wanted a weapon that could demonstrate our capability without committing us to war. Admiral Lane leaned forward. Ambassador, this is why we brought you home. We have 70 hours to decide what to do. If we do nothing, the blockade will be established, and we'll be faced with the choice of surrender or watching our colonies be destroyed one by one. If we use the Shepherd's staff, we can stop the fleet before it reaches Earth. But that action will change everything. The assembly races will know that we've been hiding advanced technology. They'll know that we've been preparing for conflict. And they'll know that we can't be intimidated anymore. Either way, our relationship with the assembly is over, Daniel said slowly. Yes, the question is whether it ends with us as victims or as something else entirely. Daniel looked around the table one more time. He saw determination on some faces, fear on others. He saw the weight of an impossible decision pressing down on all of them. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "A final attempt at diplomacy," Cole said. "We want you to contact the ambassador directly. Warn him that we know about their plans and that we're prepared to defend ourselves. Give him the chance to call off the operation. And if he refuses, then we'll know that we tried everything, and we'll do what we have to do." Daniel nodded slowly. He thought about the assembly chamber, about mocking words and the votes that had fallen like hammer blows. He thought about Harmony Station, about the 40,000 people living there who had no idea they had been marked for death. He thought about Earth, blue and beautiful and fragile, home to billions who believed they were part of a galactic community that would protect them. "I'll make the call," he said, "but I don't think he'll listen. They've already decided that we're weak. One warning isn't going to change their minds." "Maybe not," said, "but it will matter later when the history of this moment is written. It will matter that we gave them a chance." Daniel met her eyes and saw something there that surprised him. Not anger or fear, but a kind of sad determination. As if she had already seen how this would end and had made her peace with it. "All right," he said, "let's begin." The communication system took several minutes to establish a secure connection to the diplomatic frequency. Daniel spent that time reviewing the intelligence reports, memorizing the details of Operation Quiet Dawn, preparing his arguments. He knew it was probably pointless, but was right. It would matter later. History would record that humanity had sought peace even when faced with annihilation. Finally, the connection was established. An ambassador's face appeared on the screen. There was in what appeared to be a private chamber, his serpentine body coiled comfortably on a platform decorated with precious metals. He looked surprised to see Daniel, but that surprise quickly gave way to the familiar contempt. "Ambassador Price," said, his tongue flickering, "this is unexpected. I assumed you would be on your way back to your primitive world to report your failure." "I am on Earth," Daniel replied, "and I'm contacting you because we need to talk, privately before things go any further." "What is there to discuss? The Assembly has spoken. Your claim to the nebula has been rejected. The matter is closed." "The nebula isn't why I'm calling." Daniel kept his voice steady, his expression neutral. "I'm calling about Operation Quiet Dawn." His reaction was subtle, but Daniel caught it. A slight stiffening of his coils, a brief pause in the flickering of his tongue. Then the ambassador's expression smoothed into careful blankness. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do. 200 warships from 7 species, converging on Sol system in approximately 70 hours. A blockade disguised as a military exercise. And if we don't surrender, the destruction of Harmony Station as a demonstration of your resolve." Was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its mocking edge. How do you know this? Does it matter? We know. The question now is what happens next. The ambassador studied Daniel through the screen, and for the first time, there was something like genuine interest in his eyes. You surprise me, human. I did not think your species capable of this level of intelligence gathering. Perhaps we underestimated you. His tongue flickered thoughtfully. But knowing about an operation is not the same as being able to stop it. Your fleet is tiny compared to ours. Your technology is generations behind. What do you think you can do? Defend ourselves, Daniel said simply. We've been preparing for this possibility for a long time, Ambassador. We hoped we would never need to use what we built, but we will use it if we have to. His laugh was a harsh, hissing sound. You're bluffing. You have nothing that could threaten a fleet of 200 warships. If you did, you would have revealed it long ago. Would we? Revealing a weapon means your enemies can develop countermeasures. Sometimes the best defense is one that nobody knows about. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Ambassador, I'm giving you a chance. Call off the operation. Return to normal relations. We can pretend this never happened and no one has to die. And if I refuse? Then we'll defend ourselves, and you'll discover exactly what we've been hiding. Was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on Daniel's face as if trying to read something there. Then, slowly, his mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. You're serious, he said. You actually believe you can fight us? I know we can. Then you're either very brave or very foolish. The ambassador straightened on his platform. But it doesn't matter. The operation will proceed as planned. Your threats and your secret weapons won't change anything. In 70 hours, a fleet will enter your system. You will surrender or you will watch your people die. Those are your only options. There's a third option, Daniel said quietly. You could choose not to find out what we're capable of. Goodbye, Ambassador Price. The next time we speak, it will be to discuss the terms of your surrender. The screen went dark. Daniel sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of what had just happened settle over him. He had tried. He had offered peace, and it had been rejected just as he had known it would be. He stood and turned to face the others, who had been watching the conversation from the side of the room. Well, he said, that's that. He's not going to stop. We expected as much, Admiral Lane said. She was already moving toward the door. We need to get to the command center. There's a lot to do in 70 hours. Wait, Daniel held up a hand. Before we go any further, I need to understand something. This weapon, the Shepherd's Staff, you said it was designed to disable, not destroy. But what happens after? If we leave 200 warships drifting helplessly in our system, what do we do with them? Answered, we give them a choice. Surrender and be returned to there after a peace agreement is signed, or attempt to resist and be destroyed. The pulse only affects their primary systems. Their emergency beacons and life support will still function. They'll be able to communicate with us and with each other. And you think they'll surrender? Some will, some might try to fight, but without shields and weapons they won't last long against our forces. The expression was hard. Ambassador, I want you to understand something. We didn't build this weapon because we wanted to use it. We built it because we knew that someday someone would come for us. The galaxy is not a kind place. The strong take what they want from the weak, and the assembly doesn't protect anyone who can't protect themselves. We had to become strong enough to make attacking us more trouble than it's worth. Daniel looked at her for a long moment, then he nodded slowly. I understand. And I agree with what you've done. I just want to make sure we've thought through all the consequences. We have, believe me, we have. They left the conference room together and made their way through the building to the military command center. The room was enormous, filled with holographic displays and rows of operators monitoring communications from across human space. Admiral Lane took her position at the central command station, and the others spread out around her. All right, Lane said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. This is Admiral Lane. As of this moment, we are at threat level Alpha. All units are to maintain highest alert status. The operation we've been planning for is about to begin. She turned to one of her aides. Get me a connection to every ship in the fleet. I want all captains briefed within the hour. Yes, Admiral. As the command center erupted into controlled activity, Daniel found himself standing beside, watching the organized chaos unfold. His aide looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Do you think we can actually do this? She asked quietly. Daniel thought about the question for a moment. He thought about Earth, about the people who lived there, about everything humanity had built and everything they still hoped to achieve. He thought about the arrogant certainty in his eyes and the cold dismissal in his voice. I think we're about to find out, he said. 69 hours remained. The next several hours passed in a blur of activity. Admiral Lane issued orders that sent ripples through the entire human military structure. Ships that had been stationed at distant outposts were recalled to Sol. Reserve units were activated. The crews of the hidden weapons platforms were brought to full readiness. Daniel watched it all unfold from an observation gallery overlooking the command center. He had no military authority, no role to play in the preparations, but he could not bring himself to leave. This was his species' moment of truth, and he needed to witness it. Joined him after a while, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one and stood beside him, looking down at the busy room below. I've been thinking, she said, about what's said, that we're either brave or foolish. And which do you think we are? Maybe both. Maybe that's what it means to be human. She took a sip of her coffee. Every species in the assembly has been spacefaring for thousands of years. They've had time to become cautious, to learn all the rules, to understand their place in the hierarchy. We're still new enough to think we can change things. Is that foolishness or hope? I'm not sure there's a difference, smiled slightly, but I'd rather be hopeful and wrong than cynical and right. Daniel returned the smile. When did you become a philosopher? Somewhere between the Nebula vote and finding out we're about to be invaded. Impending doom does wonders for introspection. They stood in companionable silence for a while, watching the preparations continue below them. Eventually, Daniel spoke again. Whatever happens in the next few days, I want you to know something. You've been the best aide I could have asked for. I couldn't have done this job without you. Looked at him with an expression of mild alarm. Please don't talk like that. It sounds like you're expecting to die. I'm not expecting anything. I just wanted to say it while I had the chance. Well, stop it. We're going to get through this and then I'm going to ask for a raise and a vacation. A long vacation somewhere with beaches and no aliens. Daniel laughed, surprising himself. Deal. If we survive this, you can have whatever vacation you want. I'm going to hold you to that. The hours continued to pass. Reports came in from across human space as ships moved into position and weapons systems were checked and rechecked. The Shepard staff, hidden in its asteroid fortress, ran through a final series of calibrations. Everything was ready. And then, with 17 hours remaining before the enemy fleet's estimated arrival, something unexpected happened. One of the operators in the command center raised her hand. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission. It's coming from space. Admiral Lane frowned. They'd put it through. The main display screen flickered and a face appeared. It was not like the faces Daniel was used to seeing. They were aquatic beings, their features soft and fluid, their skin a deep blue-green that shifted with their emotions. This particular was older than most Daniel had seen, with the weathered look of someone who had lived long and seen much. Admiral Lane, they said, its voice carrying the musical tones of its species. I am Counselor of the High Council. I apologize for the intrusion, but there is something you must know. We're a bit busy at the moment, Counselor, Lane replied. "Unless this is about the fleet heading our way." "It is." Colors shifted to something darker, a sign of distress among The council has learned of Operation Quiet Dawn. We were not informed in advance. We were not consulted. This action is being taken without the knowledge or approval of many assembly members." Daniel stepped forward, moving to where he could be seen by the camera. "Counselor, this is Ambassador Price. Are you saying the Assembly didn't authorize this operation?" The Assembly as a whole did not. The Security Council authorized a military exercise, but they were misled about its true purpose. Only the 7 participating species know what is really planned. Colors shifted again, this time to something that might have been anger. "This is a violation of everything the Assembly is supposed to stand for. We cannot stop what is happening, but we can bear witness, and we can ensure that the truth is known." "Why are you telling us this?" Lane asked. "Because the sponsored humanity's entry into the Assembly, because we believe that your species would bring something new and valuable to our community, and because what is being done to you is wrong." The old met the camera's lens steadily. "Whatever happens in the next hours, know that you have friends who see you. Fight well, humans, and may fortune favor you." The transmission ended. The command center was silent for a long moment. Then Admiral Lane turned to her staff. "You heard the counselor. We have friends watching. Let's give them something worth seeing." She straightened in her seat. "Continue preparations. We have 17 hours left. Let's make sure we're ready." Daniel returned to his observation position, but his mind was racing. This message had changed something, though he was not sure exactly what. They were not alone. Someone out there understood what was happening and believed it was wrong. Someone would remember, whatever the outcome. It was a small thing, perhaps, but in that moment it felt like everything. The final hours approached. Humanity waited for the storm to come. And in the cold darkness between stars, 200 warships drew ever closer to their destination, carrying with them the fate of worlds. Daniel Price stood at the observation window, watching the stars, and wondered what the next day would bring.